Welcome. Thank you for coming to join. This is a presentation essentially just meant to inform folks that work with small businesses in Oregon or own a small business in Oregon about what is going on with OregonSaves. The OregonSaves deadline has already passed for employers with more than 5 employees. However, there are 2 deadlines that have been barely talked about that are coming up. And for a lot of business owners, it seems like this is the kick in the butt that they need to implement a better retirement plan than OregonSaves. I'm Lillian. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a retirement plan advisor at Heim Investment Advisors. And I'm also a volunteer tax preparer with AAR Tax Aid. And I have a radio show and podcast called Oh My Dollar. So what is OregonSaves? So OregonSaves, which is essentially, for the purposes of this, almost identical to Calsavers. Oregon started the OregonSaves program and then California copied it. However, more businesses in California have already been due to comply with it than Oregon. So it's a state-sponsored retirement plan, but it is not a state pension or a 401k. All it is a Roth IRA administered by the employer via ACH payroll deductions. So it is not the employer contributing to a plan for the employees. It is not anything special that an employee can't get for themselves. All it is a mandate that Oregon has that if you do not offer an alternative retirement plan, then you need to start administering OregonSaves. All businesses in Oregon that don't have their own qualified retirement plan have to facilitate this for employees. That might mean that employees, all of the employees end up opting out of this plan, but you have to at least have it in place. So the deadlines coming up are the really eminent one is March 1st, 2023. You either need to opt out by saying that you have a qualified retirement savings plan in place, or you have to join the OregonSaves plan if you have 3 to 4 employees. If you have 1 to 2 employees, you have to join the OregonSaves program by July 31st, 2023. That's also true if you work with certain kinds of temping agencies, then you are bound by the July 31st deadline. So who counts as employees? Because this has been a matter of great debate. I have talked to the Oregon Retirement Savings Board, which is who is in charge of administering this. And it is anybody who earns W-2 income from your business that their work is based in Oregon. So if you have an employee where they get paid via an Oregon payroll, but they are located in California, they are still considered a qualifying employee for this plan. If you have an employee who works in California and gets paid through California payroll, then they would not apply to your Oregon eligibility. Here's the really tricky part, though. S-Corps and LLC owners count as employees if they take a W-2 income from the business. So if you are an S-Corp owner, if you have, for example, 3 separate S-Corp owners in a partnership, or you have a multi-member LLC with 3 owners, and 3 of those owners take a W-2 income from the business, even if you don't have any employees, you qualify as having 3 employees. So even if you don't traditionally think of yourself as employees, all owners count towards this. So if you have 1 owner and 2 employees, you fall under the March 1st deadline. If you have 2 owners and 1 employee, then you would fall under the March 1st deadline. Self-employed individuals are not exempt from this. So you have to at least opt out by July 31st, 2023, if you are self-employed. No matter if you get paid entirely as owner's draw, whether or not you have W-2 income or not, if you are self-employed and a registered business with the state of Oregon, you need to enroll. And if you choose to opt out, you can opt out because you only have one employee, so the employee can opt out. So the big thing that was concerning is a lot of people are not necessarily getting information about the fact that they are bound by this March 1st deadline. This is especially true if you are an S Corp that is in the category of you know, didn't have employees last year, so you might not be triggering for the letters that the state is sending out. I also have heard the state is extremely behind on sending out these letters, or they sent them out so long ago because these deadlines got pushed back and back and back because of COVID that people don't remember that they got this letter. So yeah. So here's the benefits of OregonSaves. There is no cost to employers compared to other qualified retirement plans. You do not have any cost to employers, and you also do not have any fiduciary responsibility, which can be one of the big downsides and burden to small businesses, is that there can be a lot of record keeping and compliance with fiduciary responsibility for qualified retirement plans. So all this is the employee having their own portable Roth IRA that you are doing an extra step when you do payroll of depositing it into there, depositing a portion of it. It's all after tax money, so there's no like more complicated tax situations that you have to do. And it does allow you to offer a retirement option to your employees that you might not otherwise. Especially true if you're a really small business. You know, you might not have put any time or energy into a retirement plan, but you can at least advertise that you do have OregonSaves. However, since every business in the state is now required to comply with this, it isn't going to give you a competitive advantage over other employers. The facilitation is essentially when you run payroll, you will log in to the OregonSaves website and you will do an ACH deposit. There are a couple payroll providers where it can happen a little more automatically in the background, but it isn't as broad as I think maybe we would hope. Having been an administrator of an OregonSaves program, it's fine, but it is just another thing that you're going to have to do. The downsides of OregonSaves, and as you can tell, I feel strongly about this. There's a lot more things on this slide than there were on the upsides. So it's literally the same retirement plan that an employee can go out and get on their own. It's not anything special. It is just a Roth IRA. Like I said, the website, not the best to work with. There are no tax benefits for you as the employer, and mostly no tax benefits, certainly no extra tax deferral for the employee. The support to the employees is not always clear. I constantly had employees coming to me with questions about why things had auto-escalated. And there's, not a lot of clarity because there's no education for the employer about how to communicate with employees because they don't have fiduciary responsibility. But it can be really challenging to understand that they're going to be automatically enrolled at 5%, and then it's going to escalate every single year till they get to 10%. That auto escalation might not be clear to employees. I had employees coming to me thinking that their paycheck was short, not realizing that instead they were in this auto escalation. And they had to opt out because more and more they were setting aside for retirement, which sounds like a great thing, but isn't a great thing if your employee doesn't expect it. It has a pretty high investing cost for employees. The expense ratio on these is far over 1% for most of the plans, and they are also paying the administration costs on an annual fee. So it's essentially $1 of every 100 they save, roughly. And there are a lot of options that have a much, much lower investing cost, especially for Roth IRAs for someone that might be in a lower income bracket. It has a very low savings limit. So if people do want to catch up for retirement or want to save more, or if you're an employer and want to be able to defer more of your income because you don't like paying self-employment tax, there's a very low savings limit because it's the Roth IRA limit. It's $6,500 this year. There's no opportunity for you to match as an employer. And there is an income limit on these, which is, I think, very poorly communicated. But for a single person, you cannot contribute to a Roth IRA if your modified adjusted gross income is above $153,000. And obviously, it goes up slightly for larger household sizes. But it's important for people to understand that this is not the same as other retirement plans offered through their employer, in that it is bound by the same rules as the Roth IRA. So how do you get an exemption? Well, you can be exempted from OregonSaves if you already offer a qualified retirement employer-sponsored plan. So, and it has to just be to some employees. Obviously, for a qualified plan, it has to be all the employees that are qualified to be part of it. This includes the simple IRA, a SEP-IRA, a 401k, a 403b, a solo 401k. All you have to do is have something in place, and then you can opt out. You can unenroll from OregonSaves if you introduce a plan later. So if you want to buy yourself some time and you're willing to administer the OregonSaves plan for, another year before introducing a qualified retirement plan, because you just can't be it's too much work to deal with it right now, you can do that. You have to call them up and then unregister from the program. You cannot be exempted for having a Roth or traditional IRA only for the business owners. So if you're self-employed and you have a Roth or traditional, you can just say, I have access to a retirement plan, and, opt out because you've only got one employee. But say you are an S Corp owner and then you have two employees, you are not able to take your Roth or traditional IRA and be like, oh, well, we have access to a retirement plan, so we don't have to administer it for our employees. You do have to administer it, even if you have access to that as a business owner. Jenna had a good question here. How do self-employed, non-W-2, aka sole proprietors, et cetera, folks pay into it since they don't have payroll? So you can do it. They call it an off-cycle payroll for their business. They say that you log into the website and then you'll automatically administer it. But it starts to get really, really tricky because it's meant to be set as a percentage of compensation. Generally, what I would recommend for literally anyone that is self-employed is do not utilize OregonSaves. What you would do is you would just go in, you would file for the exemption, and then you can go set up a Roth IRA with a different provider. You don't have to use this state plan. And I'll talk about some of the downsides with the state plan and the very limited investment options that they have as well. Tiffany says, if we have already funded our Roth, do we just opt out? Do employees manage when they've maxed out? Yes, that's one of the big downsides to this. I think, one, yes, if you've already funded your Roth, you absolutely have to opt out because you can't contribute to this. You would be overfunding your Roth. Employees are supposed to manage when they've maxed out. The OregonSaves program will let them know if they've maxed out the OregonSaves account at $6,500, but they won't know about any of the other Roth accounts. And that was one of the areas where I felt like the employee education was really lacking. And I have seen that downside happen to some people where they didn't realize that because OregonSaves is not very clear about the fact that it's a Roth IRA. So sometimes you can run into the problem of an employee has a Roth IRA and is also contributing to OregonSaves, not realizing they're the same. So how to enroll or exempt, you just go to OregonSaves.gov And this has all of the information on there. If you are in the category of having 3 to 4 employees, as long as you did when you filed your 2021 taxes for the state of Oregon, then you will be getting a letter saying that March 1st is your deadline. On it, it has an access code. So you can either go to register your business, or you can say, I already offer a retirement plan, and certify your exemption. All you need to do is put in your EIN for your business and then the access code from the letter. If you're in the category of you didn't receive a letter, or you have no idea where that letter is because you received it in like early 2020, and it's just hasn't happened yet, then you can call their hotline, which you can find on the OregonSaves website, and they'll give you a new access code. If for some reason, like if you're not up for qualifying for this now and you haven't gotten a letter yet, but you're a new business or something like that, you can enroll at any time. So if you have 2 employees and you don't fall under the March 1st deadline, but you do fall under the July 31st deadline, you can opt in and you can start administering this plan whenever you like, if you like the option. So these are the only requirements for employers. They provide a list of employees and their payroll information to OregonSaves. The employees are then prompted to enroll, and then after 30 days, the employer has to go and update participating employee contribution rates within the employer portal so that the payroll deduction can happen. Anytime you hire a new person, they have to get added within 60 days to OregonSaves. It's a pretty easy process to add a new employee to it, but it is another step in your onboarding process. So what happens if you don't comply? What if you can't find the form and you don't deal with this, or you're trying to get a qualified retirement plan set up and you didn't go and file the exemption until it was done? Theoretically, they say employers that are out of compliance may be subject to enforcement action, including penalties and fines. This is defined in the Civil Code in under Oregon Legislature Bill SB 164. The fine, as it's written in that bill, is $100 per affected employee, up to a max of $5,000 per year. That fine, I think, is an annual fine that is levied. What I will say is I do not think that OregonSaves is going to be punishing employers for late implementation of this year. I can't guarantee that, obviously, but I think it's more likely that they're going to try to bring you in compliance than punish you with a fine. And the fine of $100 per affected employee, if you're a small employer, is likely to be quite small. And if you're self-employed, you should just go and opt out on the website and never have to think about it again. Calsavers, the fine is $250 per eligible employee, and then it's an additional $500 per employee if you don't remedy it within 90 days. So it's quite a bit steeper for Calsavers. And I will say they haven't, the deadline was in July of last year for all employers with over 5 employees in California for Calsavers. And I have not heard any rumors of them yet levying the fines. Instead, they're kind of pushing the grace period. That being said, if folks are not complying, if you have California businesses that haven't complied with Calsavers yet, the fines will likely start at some point. The state of California loves to fine businesses. And the likelihood that there will be fines starting means that you really should get anybody that has more than 5 employees in the state of California in compliance as quickly as you can. Why go for an alternative to OregonSaves? So I think I've probably made it pretty clear what I think the downsides are, but why should you not just enroll and then opt out for yourself? Why would you put together a different retirement plan so that you can qualify for an exemption? You want the competitive advantage of a proper employer-sponsored retirement plan in hiring and retention. Like, there is a significant competitive advantage to an employer-sponsored retirement plan. And it's one of the areas that small businesses can really stand out in the super tight labor market. Like, health insurance is one of the big ones. And then the next one is employer-sponsored retirement plan. And OregonSaves is just a Roth IRA, so it's not going to attract employees, and everyone has to offer it. So that would be one of the reasons. There are a ton more tax advantages and tax credits for a qualified retirement plan. You get none with OregonSaves as an employer, but there's tax credits for starting your own plan. And then there's also the tax deduction of your match and whatever you contribute towards it. If you or your employees want to save more than $6,500 annual limit for retirement, then it really is a no-brainer to start implementing a different qualified retirement plan, because you can't. There's no other options. If you have employee compensation that is greater than $153,000 modified adjusted gross income, or yourself, then you would really start to look at other options, because you'll want to get those tax advantages of putting money in other places. And if you want to contribute as a match towards retirement savings, like some people just want to do that as a business owner for their employees and invest in their employees' retirement. So the Secure Act 2 just passed. There's a bunch of different changes in the Secure Act about how 401ks are treated. But for the purposes of implementing a retirement plan, these are the things you need to know. For a business that's smaller than 100 employees, you qualify for a pretty big tax credit for setting up a qualified retirement plan. OregonSaves does not qualify for this. It has to be a plan actually run by your business. The credit is 50% of your eligible startup costs for starting a plan, up to $500 or $250 per non-highly compensated employee enrolled in the plan. For the Secure Act, though, you need to have one plan participant who is a non-highly compensated employee. So if it's just you that works for your business and you want to set up a solo 401k, you can't get this tax credit, because as the owner of the business, you are automatically a highly compensated employee. So anybody is highly compensated if they are greater than a 5% owner, or a direct relative of them, which includes spouses, or a annual compensation over $170,000. There's also one other category for 1% owners and compensation, but we can kind of move on from that. All you need to know is that if you only have owners in your business, then the Secure Act will not apply to you. But it works great if you have any other employees that would qualify for it. You can only take this credit for one qualified plan. So in most cases, it's best to make a good long-term choice. You don't want to necessarily take this credit for implementing a simple IRA, which is sort of it's an easier to administer plan. But if you do this now and you think you might want a 401k in the next couple of years, then it doesn't necessarily make sense to do it, because you can generally only take the credit kind of once per plan, per type of plan that you have for your employees. There's also an additional tax credit if you have auto enrollment for your employees. So this is particularly true for you're just making sure that employees know that they're auto enrolled. They're really trying to push that now with this Secure Act. And then the important thing to know, which is not specific to the Secure Act, is that any of your employer contributions are tax deductible. They are a business expense. So this is a very brief overview of some of the alternatives you could implement if you don't want to do OregonSaves. They're the main ones are simple IRA, SEP-IRA, safe harbor, 401k, and then as an alternative, I put OregonSaves over there. So a safe harbor 401k, starting on the side, is a type of 401k that you are very likely to do if you're a very small business, because usually when you're a super small business, you cannot comply with some of the requirements about how much is put into the plan to make it not top heavy. And a safe harbor 401k allows you to avoid that. It's a little technical. I'm happy to answer questions if anybody has any questions about it. But safe harbor is probably what you would go for. There are tax benefits to the employer. There's also tax benefits to the employee in that you can do both Roth and traditional types of contributions. So you can make it pre or post-tax money. You qualify for the Secure Act credit. You qualify for admin and the admin and testing for this, I would say, is medium high burden for a safe harbor 401k. You do have to file a form with the IRS, but for a safe harbor 401k, that form is usually easily prepared each time by whoever your record keeper and custodian of your funds is. And it's usually a pretty easy form if you're if you've got a relatively normal safe harbor 401k, but it is more paperwork that you have to do. The savings limit is $22,500 on the employee side. And you can go up to, I believe it's this year, $56,000, including the employer side of it. There is no income limit for a safe harbor 401k. And you have to contribute round about 3%. There's actually 4 different ways to do a match for a safe harbor 401k, but generally, let's say it's about a 3% match that you contribute on it. And that is the biggest expense for most employers, is that you are contributing a match of up to 3% of the employee's salary. So it adds that amount to your payroll. The annual cost for administering a safe harbor 401k is about $800 to $1,500. It really kind of depends on what administrator you go with and how many employees that you have. But because this qualifies for the Secure Act credit, for the first 3 years, that money that you would be paying is essentially 50% tax deductible, depending on certain parts about your taxes. So kind of note that in your head. What's nice about this is there's a lot of investment options. So compared to OregonSaves, where all of them are essentially State Street funds, State Street funds it doesn't have any socially responsible funds available within the portfolio of OregonSaves, and it's the exact same portfolio for Calsavers. But additionally, they're just not necessarily the best funds they're not a leader in fee adjusted performance, pretty much. The social responsibility funds are not available at all under OregonSaves, and you've only got these options from one provider. So you're really stuck in these target date retirement funds. With the Safe Harbor 401k, you can really sometimes even maybe have too many options. So when you're looking at different administrators that you would go for this, you want to find one that has a good option for employee onboarding that will help them understand how to choose and build the best portfolio based on their own risk levels and their own goals. So I think it becomes even more important when you're a small employer to really look at the 401k provider, how they onboard employees, and if it's confusing, essentially, because there are so many more investment options. So a SEP-IRA is also called a simplified employee pension. It's usually more of an option for self-employed people, because what is nice about it is it lets you save a pretty big chunk of change, and it has lower admin requirements than a 401k. You can save up to 25% of your compensation in it, or the maximum is $66,000 for 2023. But here is the downside of it. If you have other employees, is whatever you want to save for yourself, that is the amount that you also have to contribute for your employees. So, with a 401k, you can do a 3% match, but then you can save your own amount up to $22,500. But that's not how a SEP-IRA works. It is only employer contributions. So if you want to save 10% for your retirement, you're going to also have to put aside 10% of the compensation of your employees. So SEP-IRAs really only make sense for self-employed people, or if you've got, a spouse that also works in the business, then it can make sense for that. The annual costs for a SEP-IRA are very low, and the matches are, of course, a business expense. So there's also a lot of investing options for a SEP-IRA. You have pretty much a full range of them depending on the administrator you go with. Now, simple IRA is one of the ones that I think a lot of people that might be considering OregonSaves might find the best advantage. The only real downside of the simple IRA in comparison to a safe harbor 401k is it has a lower savings limit. And one of the it costs less to administer. It tends to have a lot of options. You also have to make either a 2% non-elective contribution, which just means a flat 2% of salary for all your employees that are in the plan, or a 3% match. The downside, though, of the simple IRA is that that savings limit is $15,500, and that includes you. So if you as an employer, as a self-employed person, want to, be saving more for retirement, you want to tax defer more money, then the simple IRA isn't going to necessarily be the best option for you. And then the other downside is, yes, you can use these Secure Act credits on setting up that simple IRA. But if you set up the simple IRA and then in a couple years, you're like, oh, I actually really want to have access to more tax advantage space and set up a 401k, you're not going to be able to get that Secure Act credit again, because you would have already used it on that simple IRA. So those are kind of the plus and minuses of them. I think for the simple IRA used to make a ton more sense for small businesses than jumping to the 401k. But now that we have the safe harbor 401k and there's a lot more low cost administrators that essentially handle all of the annoying kind of parts of it, for most businesses, if you want to jump into having a retirement plan and you have employees, the safe harbor 401k is probably going to be the first place that you go, but not always. Does anybody have any questions on, Jennifer Rasmussen says, can you speak to the best plan for nonprofit employers who don't care about the tax credits? So nonprofits still pay taxes, even if they are tax exempt. But if you also have the option, if you are a nonprofit employer, of a 403b. Generally, I would recommend still for most nonprofit employers, you're going to want to go for the 401k. The reason why I wouldn't necessarily recommend the 403b, it used to be that nonprofits all went for the 403b because they were like, oh, this is the one for nonprofits. It's for nonprofits and government. But 401ks with the safe harbor provisions became a lot easier to implement. And they, the additional side of the 403b is that most of them have somewhat confusing and hard to deal with compliance testing, and they can be harder to administer. And then the most important part, I think, is that most administrators of a 403b have much fewer investment options available to employees. And then the 403b limit is lower than the 401k as far as how much you can save, but it's not much lower. It's not as drastically low as the simple IRA is. So I would generally say the 401k is probably going to be the best option. And even if, you don't have a owner that is, desperately trying to reduce their taxable income, you might have employees that want to reduce your taxable income. And there are a lot of advantages to doing that. The Secure Act credit, I would have to look into if they can. Megan says, isn't the credit able to be applied to employer payroll taxes for nonprofits? I am not positive about that. I would need to look that up. Usually the Secure Act form that you use for the startup credit is actually done on the personal taxes of the business owner. And I don't know if you can get the startup credit. I'd have to dig into the IRS documentation a little bit more. Does anybody have any other questions? I'm not sure if you can do that for the. Yeah, I don't think nonprofits can qualify for that, but they still pay taxes, so they do still get other advantages. Megan is going to hop into Checkpoint for us to find out for us. Does anybody have any other questions about the different options between all of these? Here's the thing I'm going to say. OregonSaves, if you are overwhelmed and you do not feel like you are going to be able to implement a qualified retirement plan this year, you're like, it's just not going to happen this year. I got too much other stuff going on in my business or my nonprofit, and I am bound by this deadline. You could choose to just do it. You can choose to enroll in it, and you can unenroll if you want to do a qualified retirement plan in the future. I would use this as an opportunity to implement a qualified retirement plan, just so that you can get it in place and take advantage of those credits, which aren't going to be around forever. The current sunset for them is going to be 2026. So there's, I think, a reason to just use this as the kick in the butt to actually get a retirement plan in place for your employees, but you can do OregonSaves. At its heart, the goal of the OregonSaves program was good, which is that Oregon is behind on retirement savings. And one of the reasons that Oregonians are so far behind on retirement savings is because we have so many small businesses, especially very small businesses in this state. And because of that, a lot of people didn't even have access to a retirement plan at work. And so the state of Oregon can't create a new type of retirement plan. That isn't a thing that is within their power. That is done at the federal level. So instead, what they did is they tried to come up with a way to make the law require an employer retirement plan, but then facilitate it through the existing mechanisms, which is why it's essentially a Roth IRA. But they also set goals about how low the expense ratios were going to be on the funds and what the fees were going to be for employees. And they have not met those goals. They have exceeded the amount of expenses time over time. And so, yeah, I think there's a bunch of reasons to not go with it. Should you just go for it? Maybe. You should just go for it if you feel like you are you just want to be done with this problem, and you're not going to be too annoyed about having to log in every single time payroll and doing the ACH transfers. You could just do it. But if you find yourself very motivated by the opportunity to implement something that will likely be better for your taxes, that will likely be better for your employees, that is going to give you better options, then this is a good opportunity to do that. Any questions? So if you do want to set up a retirement plan and you're like, I'm going to use this opportunity to set up a better qualified retirement plan, you can talk to a plan consultant. So you might be able to do this on your own, but usually the advantage of engaging a plan consultant is they'll be able to figure out what the best option is for your business. I am one of them. I'm not the only one, but you can send me an email at lillian@heiminvestmentadvisors.com and follow up with me. If you have any questions about setting up a retirement plan, I am happy and here to help you with it. No other questions? Great. Jenna asked, when will the recording be available to share with folks? I think we have to wait for Zoom to upload it. But I think it will be